The Wanderer floated like a ghost ship in the endless black of space. For 300 years it had drifted through the void sector, its human crew long gone, its purpose forgotten. The ship's hull bore countless scars from meteorites and cosmic dust, telling the story of centuries spent alone in the dark. Commander Veltar adjusted his breathing apparatus as he led his team through the airlock. The Galactic Archaeological Division had been tracking this derelict for months, and today they would finally board it. His boots clanked against the metal floor as emergency lighting flickered to life, triggered by their presence. "Atmosphere is still breathable," reported his scanner operator, a young Keltheran named Jixpo. These humans really knew how to build their ships to last. The corridors stretched before them like tunnels into the past. Veltar had explored dozens of abandoned vessels from various species, but human ships always felt different. There was something about the way they designed their spaces that felt both alien and strangely familiar at the same time. They moved deeper into the ship, their helmet lights cutting through the darkness. Family photos still hung on some walls, showing smiling human faces frozen in time. Personal belongings floated in zero gravity. A child's toy, someone's reading glasses, a coffee mug with "World's Best Dad" printed on it in faded letters. "Poor creatures," whispered Dr. Kethmol, the expedition's xenoarchaeologist. He was a Vorthan, known throughout the galaxy for his expertise in extinct civilizations. They vanished so suddenly. One day they were expanding across dozens of star systems, the next day they were just gone. The team reached the ship's armory, and Veltar's scanner immediately started beeping with excitement. Rows of weapons lined the walls, each one carefully secured in its designated slot. Most were clearly energy-based: plasma rifles, ion cannons, the usual technology any spacefaring species would develop. But in the center of the room, displayed in what appeared to be a place of honor, sat something that made the entire team stop and stare. It was a simple metal tube no longer than a human forearm. One end was wider than the other, and there was a curved metal piece that looked like it was designed to be pulled. The whole thing appeared to be made of basic steel and wood, materials so primitive that most galactic species had stopped using them millennia ago. "What is this supposed to be?" asked Jixpo, scanning the device with his equipment. "My readings show it's just metal and wood. No energy source, no plasma chambers, no molecular disruptors." Dr. Kethmol carefully lifted the weapon from its display case. It was surprisingly heavy for something so simple. He turned it over in his hands, examining every detail with the practiced eye of someone who had studied thousands of artifacts. "Look at this craftsmanship," he murmured, running his finger along the metal surface. "Every piece fits together perfectly. The balance is remarkable. But the technology..." He shook his head in bewilderment. "It's so primitive I can barely understand how it's supposed to work." Veltar activated his recording device. "Personal log, day 47 of the Wanderer expedition. We've discovered what appears to be a kinetic projectile weapon of human design. Preliminary scans suggest it operates using chemical propulsion to launch small metal objects at high velocity." The idea seemed almost laughable, while the rest of the galaxy had moved on to weapons that could disintegrate matter at the atomic level. Humans had apparently been throwing metal pellets at their enemies. It was like bringing a stone axe to a laser fight. "Commander," called out another team member from across the armory, "you need to see this." They gathered around a wall display that had somehow remained functional after all these years. With a few touches, it came to life, showing technical specifications for the primitive weapon they had discovered. The information was all there: how the chemical explosive propelled the projectile, how the rifling in the barrel made it spin for accuracy, how the simple trigger mechanism released the firing pin. It was elegantly simple in a way that made their own advanced weapons seem almost wastefully complex. But what struck the team most was the reverence with which the information was presented. This wasn't just a weapon to the humans. It was a piece of their heritage, their culture, their identity. The display included historical information about similar weapons used on their homeworld, stories of how such simple devices had shaped their civilization. They actually took pride in this, Dr. Kethamol said softly. While every other species was racing to develop the most advanced technology possible, humans were preserving their primitive past. As they prepared to transport the artifact back to Centris Prime, none of them could have imagined that this simple metal tube would soon change everything they thought they knew about warfare, technology, and the true nature of human ingenuity. The Wanderer would continue its lonely journey through space, but its secrets were about to shake the foundations of galactic civilization. The Galactic War College on Centris Prime buzzed with excitement as beings from across the galaxy gathered for the annual technology exhibition. Representatives from every major species filled the massive amphitheater, their various breathing apparatus and translation devices creating a symphony of clicks, whirs, and electronic hums. Professor Yexhai stood at the center of the demonstration. Floor, his 6 arms gesturing dramatically as he addressed the crowd. Behind him, a massive holographic display showed the primitive human weapon they had recovered from the Wanderer. Esteemed colleagues, his voice boomed through the translation system. Today we witness the final proof of technological evolution. Before you lies a relic from humanity's dark age. A weapon so crude, so barbarically simple, that it serves as the perfect example of why some species fail to advance. The audience murmured with amusement. In the front row, military cadets from the prestigious Vorthon Academy pointed at the display and chittered among themselves. One young cadet, Zixkara, leaned over to her classmate. Look at that thing, she whispered. It doesn't even have an energy core. How did they expect to win battles with toys like that? Her classmate next below nodded in agreement. My younger siblings' play weapons are more sophisticated than this. No wonder humans disappeared. They never learned to adapt. Captain Suldek, the Academy's weapons instructor, approached the demonstration platform with confident strides. He had spent decades studying military technology from across the galaxy, and in his opinion, nothing could be more obvious than the superiority of modern energy-based weapons. To ensure a fair demonstration, Suldek announced, we have prepared our most advanced defensive system. He gestured to the far end of the range where a shimmering blue barrier had been erected. This Class 7 force field can withstand direct hits from antimatter cannons. It has never been penetrated by any known weapon. The audience settled into their seats, expecting to watch the primitive human projectile bounce harmlessly off the barrier like a pebble against a mountain. Some had already started placing bets on how far the bullet would travel before being stopped. Suldek lifted the ancient pistol, feeling its weight in his hands. Despite its primitive nature, there was something unsettling about the weapon. It felt solid, purposeful, like it had been designed by someone who understood violence in ways that modern species had forgotten. The weapon operates on a simple principle, he explained to the crowd while examining the device. A chemical explosive propels a small metal projectile down this tube. The humans called it a bullet. Watch as 3 centuries of technological advancement renders their greatest achievement obsolete. He raised the weapon, pointing it toward the force field. The amphitheater fell silent except for the low hum of recording equipment and the gentle whir of air circulation systems. Suldek squeezed the trigger. The explosion was louder than anyone expected. The ancient weapon bucked in his hands with surprising violence, and a cloud of smoke erupted from its barrel. The sharp crack of the gunshot echoed through the amphitheater like thunder, causing several species with sensitive hearing to clutch their auditory organs in pain. But what happened next defied everything they thought they knew about physics. The bullet struck the force field and passed through it as if it didn't exist. No flash of light, no energy discharge, no dramatic collision. The projectile simply continued on its path as though the most advanced defensive system in the galaxy was nothing more than colored air. The metal slug slammed into the reinforced wall behind the target zone with a sound like a hammer hitting an anvil. Durasteel designed to withstand starship impacts cracked and buckled as the bullet buried itself 3 feet deep into the supposedly impenetrable barrier. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the gentle tinkle of metal, fragments falling to the floor. Suldek stared at the weapon in his hands as if it had turned into a venomous serpent. The smoking barrel pointed toward the ceiling, and he could smell the acrid scent of burned chemical propellant. a smell that no one in the galaxy had experienced for centuries. "Run the diagnostic," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the amphitheater's sound system. The force field technician's hands shook as he operated his control panel. "Sir," he called out, his voice cracking with confusion, "the barrier is still at full power. All systems are functioning normally. According to our readings, nothing should have been able to penetrate it." The crowd began to murmur, then talk, then shout as the implications sank in. Representatives from military academies across the galaxy were frantically activating their communication devices, sending urgent messages to their homeworlds. "Test it again," Suldek demanded, but his voice lacked conviction. Deep down, he already knew what the result would be. Emergency klaxons began wailing throughout the facility as safety protocols automatically engaged. The demonstration had gone from educational exercise to potential catastrophe in the span of seconds. As security teams rushed to contain the situation, one thought echoed through every mind in the amphitheater. If humans could build weapons this effective 3 centuries ago, what other surprises had they left behind? Dr. Nixara hadn't slept in 3 days. Dark circles shadowed her eyes as she hunched over the quantum microscope, studying fragments of the bullet that had shattered everything the galaxy thought it knew about physics. Around her, the emergency research facility hummed with desperate activity as the brightest minds from dozens of worlds worked to solve an impossible puzzle. "This can't be right," muttered her assistant Kolvex, staring at his scanner readings. "The molecular structure keeps changing every time I look at it." Nixara rubbed her tired eyes and peered at the display. The bullet fragment floated in, a containment field looking like nothing more than a small piece of dull metal. But according to their instruments, it was anything but ordinary. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a section of the readout. "The lead isn't just lead. It's been altered at the atomic level. These isotopes don't exist in nature. They shouldn't be able to exist at all." Across the laboratory, Professor Dekmoral was having his own crisis of understanding. He had spent 40 years studying material science, and everything he was seeing challenged the fundamental laws of physics he had devoted his life to understanding. "The metal remembers," he announced to the room, his voice filled with wonder and fear. Somehow the humans programmed this bullet to remember its purpose. Even after being fired, even after impact, it's still trying to penetrate barriers. The research team gathered around his workstation, staring at the impossible data streaming across multiple displays. The bullet fragment was generating its own localized gravitational field, bending space-time around itself in ways that made conventional defensive systems completely useless. "But how?" asked Dr. Zilnara, the team's quantum physicist. "To create stable exotic matter like this would require technology we can't even imagine. The energy requirements alone should have torn their entire solar system apart." Nixara pulled up another display showing the chemical analysis of the gunpowder residue. "It gets worse. This isn't just explosive powder. It's a carefully engineered substance that converts matter directly into kinetic energy. Every grain contains microscopic structures that shouldn't be possible to manufacture." The implications were staggering. While the galaxy's greatest civilizations had spent millennia perfecting energy weapons that overcame obstacles through brute force, humans had apparently learned to manipulate reality itself, making their simple projectiles ignore the laws of physics that governed everything else. Emergency archaeological teams were already being dispatched to every known human site across the galaxy. If one primitive weapon could bypass their most advanced defenses, what other surprises were waiting to be discovered? The first reports began arriving within hours. On Kepler Station, researchers examining a human sword made from what appeared to be simple iron discovered that the blade could cut through molecular bonds themselves. The metal seemed to exist in multiple quantum states simultaneously, allowing it to slice through materials that should have been impossible to damage. "The sword doesn't cut," reported the lead archaeologist, her voice trembling with disbelief. "It convinces matter to separate itself. The atoms actually want to move apart when this blade approaches them." From the mining colony on Rigel 7th came even more disturbing news. A human pickaxe, crafted from what looked like ordinary steel and wood, had somehow carved through a wall of neutronium. material so dense that a single teaspoon would weigh billions of tons on most worlds. We thought it was just a primitive tool, the colony's chief engineer explained over the subspace communicator. But when we tested it, the pickaxe head passed through the neutronium like it was soft clay. The material didn't break or crack. It just moved aside. Dr. Nixara felt her worldview crumbling as each new report arrived. On Tau Ceti, human armor made from what appeared to be simple leather and metal had deflected direct hits from antimatter cannons. On Proxima Station, a wooden bow was firing arrows that traveled through folded space, appearing instantly at their targets regardless of distance. They weren't primitive, she whispered to herself as the truth became undeniable. They were so far beyond us that we couldn't even recognize their technology as technology. The research team worked frantically through the night, trying to understand how humans had achieved such impossible feats. Slowly, a pattern began to emerge. Every human artifact followed the same principle. They appeared simple on the surface while incorporating physics that the galaxy's greatest scientists couldn't even begin to comprehend. "Look at this," Kolvek said, pulling up a comparative analysis. "Their weapons don't fight against natural laws, they work with them. Instead of overpowering matter and energy, they convince the universe to cooperate." Professor Dekmoral nodded grimly. "We've been trying to master the universe through force for thousands of years. Humans apparently learned to make friends with it instead." As dawn broke over Centris Prime, the research team faced a terrifying realization. Humanity hadn't disappeared because they were weak or primitive. They had vanished because they had evolved beyond the need for conventional technology, beyond the need for the galaxy's understanding of what was possible. And somewhere out there, they were still watching, still waiting. Still far ahead of everything the galaxy thought it knew about the nature of reality itself. The universe had just become a much more dangerous place. The research facility on Kepler Station had become the center of the galaxy's most urgent investigation. Dr. Wixenal stood before a wall of holographic displays, each one showing impossible readings from human artifacts discovered across dozens of worlds. Her hands trembled as she pointed to the latest analysis. "Every single piece follows the same pattern," she announced to the packed conference room. "What looks primitive on the outside contains technology that rewrites the laws of physics." The room buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from every major galactic civilization tried to process what they were seeing. Admiral Gextor, the Galactic Council's military commander, leaned forward in his chair. "Explain it in simple terms, Doctor. How can a piece of metal and wood be more advanced than our most sophisticated weapons?" Wixenal activated another display showing the internal structure of a human sword. "This blade appears to be made of bronze, but when we scan it at the quantum level, we see something incredible. The metal's atomic structure changes in real time, adapting to whatever it encounters. It's not just a sword, it's programmable matter that thinks." Her assistant, Lixpode, pulled up readings from a human arrow they had tested earlier. "Look at this wooden shaft. The grain pattern isn't random. It's a natural superconductor that channels energy from the quantum vacuum. Every arrow becomes a small piece of controlled reality distortion." The revelations kept coming, each one more unsettling than the last. Human shields that didn't block attacks but convinced incoming projectiles to change direction. Human tools that didn't break materials but asked them politely to reshape themselves. Human vehicles that didn't fight against gravity but negotiated with it for better terms. "They mastered something we never even considered," Wixenal continued, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and terror. "While we were building bigger weapons and stronger defenses, humans were learning to work with the fundamental forces of the universe itself." Days passed as archaeological teams raced to excavate every known human site. Each discovery painted a clearer picture of a civilization that had transcended conventional technology so completely that their most advanced creations looked like primitive crafts to less evolved minds. On Vega Prime, researchers found a human shelter that looked like a simple log cabin. When they tried to scan it, their instruments couldn't detect any materials at all. The building existed in a state of quantum uncertainty, simultaneously real and unreal until someone decided to interact with it. "The structure reads our intentions," reported the team leader. his voice crackling over the subspace communicator. When we approach it as shelter seekers, it becomes solid wood and stone. When we approach it as threats, it becomes something else entirely, something our scanners can't even process. From the Outer Rim territories came reports of human gardens where plants grew in impossible spirals, their roots extending into dimensions that mathematics said couldn't exist. The vegetables from these gardens could feed a person for weeks, with a single bite, not because they contained more nutrition, but because they convinced the body it was already satisfied. Dr. Wixnall felt her understanding of reality crumbling with each new report. They didn't just advance beyond us technologically, she realized. They advanced beyond the need for technology as we understand it. The breakthrough came when her team discovered a human library on an abandoned colony world. The books appeared to be made of ordinary paper and ink, but when they opened them, the words rearranged themselves based on what the reader needed to know. It's not just information storage, Lixpode explained excitedly. These books are teaching tools that adapt to the reader's level of understanding. A child would see simple pictures and basic concepts. A scientist would see complex equations and detailed explanations. But the most disturbing discovery came when they tried to learn from the books themselves. The human knowledge wasn't just advanced, it was fundamentally different. Where galactic science sought to control and dominate natural forces, human science seemed focused on understanding and cooperation. Look at this, Wixnall said, projecting a page from one of the books. Their physics isn't about forcing particles to behave differently. It's about understanding why particles want to behave the way they do and then working with those desires. The implications were staggering. Every war, every conflict, every struggle for resources that had shaped galactic history for millennia, humans had apparently solved all of it by simply asking the universe nicely instead of trying to beat it into submission. Suddenly, every communication array in the galaxy crackled to life simultaneously. The transmission reached every world, every station, every ship at exactly the same moment, bypassing all security protocols and encryption systems as if they didn't exist. This is Admiral Kim Dae-ho of the Terran Defense Force, the calm human voice announced across all frequencies. We have been monitoring your examination of our cultural artifacts with great interest. The message continued, transmitted in perfect synchronization across light years of space. Your scientific curiosity is commendable, though your conclusions remain somewhat incomplete. These items you've been studying represent our elementary school projects created by children learning basic principles of reality manipulation. The galaxy fell silent as the implications sank in. Their most advanced weapons couldn't penetrate human children's toys. You have 72 standard hours to return our artifacts to their designated coordinates, Kim Dae-ho continued. Failure to comply will result in a practical demonstration of what our adult population has learned to create. The transmission ended, leaving the galaxy to contemplate a terrifying new reality. Humanity had never disappeared at all. They had simply outgrown the need to be noticed. The Galactic Council chamber erupted into chaos as the transmission ended. Representatives from hundreds of worlds shouted at each other in dozens of languages, their translation devices struggling to keep up with the frantic conversations. Fear and confusion filled the air like a toxic gas. Admiral Gextor slammed his fist on the council table, his four eyes blazing with anger. We cannot bow to threats from a species that abandoned civilization centuries ago. If they want their trinkets back, they can come and take them. But not everyone shared his confidence. Chancellor Vixmara, representing the diplomatic corps, stood with her tentacles quivering. Admiral, these aren't just trinkets. Our own scientists can't understand how they work. What if we're dealing with beings who've evolved beyond our comprehension? Evolved or not, they're still made of flesh and blood, Gextor snapped back. I'm activating the galactic defense grid. Every fleet in known space will converge on Centris Prime. Let's see how advanced they really are when faced with the combined might of our armada. Across the galaxy, the greatest military force ever assembled began to mobilize. Thousands of warships from every major civilization started their journey toward the capital world. Plasma cannons charged, antimatter torpedoes loaded, molecular disruptors calibrated to maximum power. Dr. Nixara watched the preparations from her laboratory with growing dread. She had spent the last week studying human artifacts, and everything she had learned told her this was a terrible mistake. "They're not understanding what we're dealing with," she whispered to her assistant. "These humans don't think like us, they don't fight like us, they don't even exist like us anymore." Her fears proved prophetic when the proximity alarms began, screaming throughout Centris Prime. The holographic displays in the council chamber flickered to life, showing the space around their world. What they saw defied every law of physics they thought they understood. Ships appeared from nowhere, not gradually, not with the telltale signs of faster-than-light travel, but instantly, as if reality had simply decided they belonged there. Dozens became hundreds. Hundreds became thousands, until the space around Centris Prime was filled with vessels unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The human fleet looked like something from a museum. Their ships appeared to be constructed from wood and metal, with designs that resembled ancient sailing vessels adapted for space travel. Solar wind caught in what looked like actual sails, propelling the craft with impossible grace through the vacuum of space. "This has to be some kind of joke," Admiral Gextor muttered, staring at the display. "Those ships shouldn't even be able to survive in space, let alone fly." His weapons officer, Commander Sulbeck, ran quick scans of the approaching vessels. "Sir, I'm reading wood, iron, canvas, and rope. No energy signatures, no plasma cores, no antimatter drives. According to our instruments, those ships are held together with nails and good intentions. Then they'll fall apart the moment we fire." "On them," Gextor declared. "All ships open fire." The combined galactic fleet unleashed hell itself. Plasma beams that could melt asteroids, antimatter torpedoes that could crack moons, molecular disruptors that could unmake matter at the atomic level. The barrage was so intense that it lit up the entire star system like a miniature sun. But when the energy dissipated, the human ships remained completely untouched. The weapons had passed through them as if they were firing at ghosts, leaving not even a scorch mark on the wooden hulls. "Impossible," Sulbeck whispered. "Our sensors still read them as ordinary materials. Wood doesn't ignore plasma fire. Metal doesn't let antimatter pass through it." The human response was swift and surgical. From their primitive-looking vessels came projectiles that moved with impossible precision. Not energy beams or exotic particles, but simple metal slugs that somehow navigated through space as if guided by intelligence. Each projectile found its target with mathematical certainty. They passed through energy shields as if they didn't exist, penetrated the strongest armor ever created, and disabled critical systems with pinpoint accuracy. Within minutes, the entire galactic defense fleet was powerless, their ships intact, but completely helpless. "How?" Admiral Gextor demanded, his voice cracking with disbelief. "How are they doing this?" The answer came as Admiral Kim Daeho's voice filled every communication channel in the system. "Your weapons fight against reality. Our weapons work with it. You try to force the universe to bend to your will. We learn to dance with it instead." The human fleet began collecting their artifacts from various worlds, their wooden ships moving, with the fluid grace of living creatures. As they prepared to depart, Kim Dae-ho transmitted one final message that would echo through galactic history. "We left known space 3 centuries ago, not because we feared you, but because we had outgrown the need for conflict. You represent everything we once were: violent, destructive, determined to conquer rather than understand." His voice carried a note of profound sadness. "We hoped that in our absence, you might learn wisdom. Instead, you've remained trapped in the same cycle of competition and warfare that we abandoned long ago." The human ships began to fade from sensors, not departing but simply choosing to exist somewhere else. "We will return when you've learned that true strength comes not from overpowering your enemies, but from understanding that enemies are unnecessary." Until that day, Kim Dae-ho concluded, remember this moment. Remember that the most dangerous opponent is not the one who threatens you with superior force, but the one who makes you realize that force was never the answer. The human fleet vanished as mysteriously as it had appeared, leaving the galaxy forever changed. They had demonstrated something more terrifying than any weapon: the power of transcendence itself. And in the silence that followed, every being in known space understood that they were no longer the apex predators they had believed themselves to be. Somewhere out there, humanity was watching, waiting, and hoping that one day, the galaxy might be ready to evolve beyond the need for war. The age of human dominance hadn't ended 3 centuries ago. It had simply moved beyond the galaxy's ability to perceive it. Until now,